Hello everyone. It's especially cold over here today, at minus 13 degrees, which is not unusual for the time of the year. But yeah, this is one of the coldest parts of the year. So I hope, if you're staying around this region, I hope you're staying warm. And I know yesterday's video was little on the longer side, so I'll try to keep this crisp today. And that means we should get started. Let's start. The first one from Remote Not Distant. Leaders feel powerless in a hybrid workplace. In short, they miss being in control. So we are seeing this today when companies that were remote during the pandemic, and they actually saw productivity gains and everything, but now they're calling people back and citing things like productivity and efficiency and control. Or I mean, of course, they're not saying that because everybody knows that people were productive during the pandemic, but now they're calling it in terms of culture and things like that. And I think this highlight hits the nail on, especially one of the most important factors, why managers are feeling little threatened, because managing in a remote environment is extremely hard. Managers are typically those who have had a long tenure and their whole learning has been in an office environment, and now they are like now they're thrown into the in this remote environment, and during pandemic they had no choice. It was uh, I mean, it was something they had to do, but now they have a choice. They miss being in control. That and not necessarily in a bad way. I'm not attributing malice over here, but this is what they know. And to be fair, it is very hard to manage in a remote workplace. uh, but that's how the trend is going, and managers need to learn now how to manage in a remote workspace. And it's not about giving up control. uh, you still can control the team's output, but that's what you have to determine. How are you going to control the team's output, and what control you're looking for anyway? These are the questions managers need to ask themselves, and then decide that, okay, is it the right call to call people back in office, in a hybrid setting, on a or on a full-time basis. So yeah, this highlight kind of covers that one of the reasons that managers feel that it's things are not working well, they don't have enough control over the team, is because the tools that they are aware of, typically things like charm and concepts like management by walking around, those kind of things, they're simply not possible in a remote workspace. So yeah, this book is a whole discussion on that. So anyway, if I try to go into this, it's like basically covering the whole book, which, by the way, I should be doing one of these days in a summary video like I did for a previous book. So but for now, let's move on. The molecule of more. Even a future 1 second away is unreal. It is only the stark facts of the present that are real, facts that must be accepted exactly as they are, facts that cannot be modified by a hair's breadth to suit our needs. This is the world of reality. The future where dopaminergic creatures live their lives is a world of phantoms. So it's curious that this highlight, it's kind of very similar to what I read in this other book called I mean, it's come up here many times. That's 4,000 weeks. And one of the points kind of repeated in that book is that future is not real. As in, like for example, when we say that we have 1 hour to do something, if we plan, we don't really have that 1 hour. We don't know what's going to happen in the next second. It's all imaginary. It's not real. Basically, like this highlight also says. So what we are saying is that we assume we have 1 hour to plan something. It's all imaginary. It's not real. It's like this highlight says, it's a world of phantoms. But that's where dopaminergic creatures live their lives. And this book is about dopamine, right? That's the context over here. It's not about time management. Um, so the book is making a case that dopaminergic creatures, they live in this world of future, the world that doesn't really exist, as against the HNN circuits in our brain, here and now circuits, that focuses on the present. Um, but now we'll move on. Extreme ownership. If frontline leaders and troops executing the mission lack the ability to adapt, this becomes detrimental to the team's performance. So the balance between discipline and freedom must be found and carefully maintained. In that lies the dichotomy. Discipline, strict order, regimen, and control might appear to be the opposite of total freedom, the power to act, speak, or think without any restrictions. Should scroll up. But in fact, discipline is the pathway to freedom. So this is something that's kind of like, if I go into this, it's kind of covering a huge chunk of the book. But on the surface level, the the highlight is kind of making a point that discipline and freedom are not at odds with each other. They actually go hand in hand. If you want to achieve freedom, if you want to achieve autonomy, discipline is required. It's kind of um, like I'll use an analogy from software engineering world, that if you want your pull requests to be merged much quicker, it's better that you follow the team standards, in terms of coding practices and coding style and everything. And there are tools that enforce this as well. So if you follow that discipline, that following the coding style, whatever your team agrees to, you're following that, it's much easier, it's much faster, quicker to get your code through the review, because now, like the things that are trivial to take care of, they're already taken care of by the discipline that you maintained. I know a lot of you might not relate to this example here, but I can't really think of anything else right now. But I'm sure, if you reflect, there are many examples where it is discipline that leads to freedom. It's not really they're not really at odds with each other. And this book also makes the case. If you have the context, and if you know the procedures that you're going to follow, if you're disciplined about it, then you have autonomy to do, as you see fit in a given situation. We'll move on. Pirates in the Navy. For most people, changes within the company can feel like chaos is being introduced into their once predictable workplace. On the other hand, people also recognize that things do not stay the same and change is inevitable. Yeah, I'm not really sure. I mean, like, this highlight in itself says enough, but there is of course some context over here which I'm missing, which I don't recall. But the curious thing is, it's kind of very relevant to the first highlight we discussed today from remote not distant. But for now, we'll move on. The talent war. In traditional corporate hiring practices, the objective has seemingly shifted from hiring the best to hiring the familiar and safe. People are more afraid of a bad hire than they're excited by a good hire. We see this all the time now, that people, they are just like they're playing safe, and of course they have the reasons. It's like they've either had their fingers burned before, or I mean, essentially that they've had their fingers burned before, and then it goes into a huge um, huge cycle of what's the word? Let's just say problems. Huge loop of problems. So anyway, the objective has seemingly shifted from hiring the best to hiring the familiar and safe. We see this all the time, and I don't really think I need to talk anything else over here. We'll move on. Think again. Great thinkers don't harbor doubts because they're imposters. They maintain doubts because they know we are all partially blind, and they're committed to improving the sight. They don't boast about how much they know. They marvel at how little they understand. They're aware that each answer raises new questions, and the quest for knowledge is never finished. A mark of lifelong learners is recognizing that they can learn something from everyone they meet. Yeah, I think this highlight says it perfectly. It's we often get this impression that somebody who is a great thinker, they know all the answers, but it's quite the opposite. They're usually ones who keep saying that they don't know enough. In fact, it's like there is a saying that the mark of true knowledge is that you admit that you don't know enough. So this kind of elaborates on that saying, that they don't, these thinkers. It's not that they're imposters. It's that they recognize that we are all partially blind. We have our biases, we have our blind spots, and that's why we're always open to learning. We may know for sure something. We may know something for sure, that okay, that this is definitely the case, but we always have to be open that okay, this may not be the case in another environment, or at another time in the same environment even. So yeah, let's move on. Get it done. But paid artists produce more, not less art, and raises boost employees' morale, a good thing for management. In these examples, people expect to get paid. The monetary incentive is part of the reason they engage in the activity. Because you expect to get paid for your work, getting your paycheck doesn't cloud your understanding of why you do the work in the first place. Just as selling art doesn't cloud artists' understanding of their motivation. This is a section about incentives and motivation. I mean, this whole book is about motivation, really. And this is the section about incentives and, how monetary incentives sometimes produce a negative result. And so the author is making a case, yeah, that's true. Monetary incentives do distort the objective sometimes, but not in all cases. Like for example, this in the examples in this highlight, artists, paid artists produce more, not less art, and raises boost employees' morale because they expect to get paid for their work. It's not it's not misaligned from their objective. It's not misaligned from the reason that they're doing that work. They expect to get paid for that work. But the problem happens when the things which are part of their work, and then you add on incentives to kind of motivate them further. Like for example, motivate them to do something that's little beyond the job description. And incentives hurt in those cases because now it's actually clouding the judgment. So sorry, clouding the intentions. So it may work temporarily. Again, the book goes to show that temporarily, yeah, it works. So in the short term, this monetary incentives, they work in the short term, but in the long term they cause more harm than good. We'll move on. The reading list. I think you can read whatever you want into anything. That is the point of books. Okay, I really like this highlight. I think in this book I just did two highlights, and I have a whole video about reading list. I'll link to that from the description. So yeah, this highlight is pretty straightforward. The point of books is that you can read it the way you want. You have your own imagination. It's your own world, and you can build it as you see fit. It's not dependent on some cinematographer's vision or director's vision of how you see it, like typically that what happens in movies. But in books it's really all up to you. You can read whatever you want into anything. And that's what happened. This is something a character says. I'm forgetting his name, but the protagonist of the story, I think he says that. Anyway, let's move on. Offsites that work. And when you think about adding outside experts to the mix, make sure their expertise relates to your meeting's objectives. Inviting an expert just because she's an expert takes the team nowhere, except perhaps for a ride on her hobby house. If you bring in a marketing guru, for instance, you're going to look at your corporate issues through a marketing lens. This is an article for about offsites, like the title says, and it just makes a case that if you're going to offsites are really something that you should really run in house. But if you're going to add outside experts, make sure that the expertise relates to the meeting objectives, not just because they are experts in their own field. And if you do that, you risk looking at all issues through their lens. Anyway, I think I'll link to the article. You can read it if you're interested in offsites. But for now, we'll move on. Extreme ownership. Waiting for the 100% right and certain solution leads to delay, indecision, and inability to execute. Leaders must be prepared to make an educated guess based on previous experience, knowledge of how the enemy operates, likely outcomes, and whatever intelligence is available in the immediate moment. This is about, we have talked about this before as well. It's about not waiting for 100% of information. Like the sweet spot is somewhere between 40 and 70%. Less than 40, you don't know enough to act. More than 70, you've waited too long. You should really act now. So waiting for that 100%, there are many problems. It leads to delay, indecision, and inability to execute it. And in other books, when we read about this, the common effect is procrastination. We see that all the time, right? So like one of the reasons why we procrastinate is that we feel that we don't have enough to start. And what we are really saying is that we want to know 100% of how everything is going to work out before we start. This is saying the same thing in a different setting. So we'll move on, which is really the end of the highlights today. I think still on the little, this video is still on the longer side, but yeah, we'll try to keep it crisp tomorrow. Sorry about that. And you have a good day. Bye.